Hello, this is Jamal Baraka reporting from Planet EJOBN, The Extraordinary Journey of a Black Nerd. This evening, we're going to be discussing Swamp Thing and the Swamp Thing Winter Special. This comic came out a couple weeks ago, I believe now, and it was written by Tom King and illustrated by Jason Fabok. This was a one-shot, 80-page special. It's a little bit on the pricey side in comparison to what most of the comics cost from DC right now. They usually range between $2.99 and $3.99. This one actually was $7.99, and but it's well worth it, and I recommend it. It is one of the best comics I've read in recent memory. If you're going to pay a little bit more money for a comic book, this is it. I would give it a solid 10 out of 10. Let's get going. Now, I'm not all that familiar with Swamp Thing as a character. He's a character that's been around forever. You don't read comics as long as I've read him and not know who Swamp Thing is. He is an elemental. I know that he has connections with the nature of the planet, the earth, the plants, and life itself. I know that he had a crappy movie back in the 80s. I know that the best run from Swamp Thing came from Alan Moore, or at least that's what we're told when discussing the character. I ran into Swamp Thing late last year in a Tom King Batman book. The story was great, and I have to admit that I am biased. I read pretty much anything that Tom King writes lately. I've been a fan ever since his Vision comic that came out from Marvel. I was upset when the book was canceled, but basically anything Tom King does, I'm going to at least check it out. The character was portrayed as being basically an elemental god who's detached from humanity, but occasionally his humanity peeks through. This is an interesting concept, interesting take on a character, and you rarely see gods falling into the falls that Swamp Thing fell into in that issue. So naturally, when Swamp Thing in the Winter Special was announced and Tom King was the writer, I figured, hey, I'll put it on my pull list. I get out there and read it, and this book is a masterpiece. The story is called The Talk of the Saints, and it starts out in a world that has changed from being the normal setting, life, lush, plants, to a world that is transferred into basically a snowball. We see Swamp Thing traveling in the snow, and he's traveling with a child. And the child is someone that's defenseless, and we see instantly that Swamp Thing has taken on the protector role to this child. They are traveling. Swamp Thing is starting fires for the boy, making sure he's taken care of, making sure he's warm, protecting him against wild animals. And one of the things about this story is that there's no real sense of time. One of the devices that Tom King uses in this book is, instead of giving like specifics about time or when this is taking place, he just says later. So we'll have an instance where something happens and the time will pass and it'll just say later. And it does this throughout the series. So at one point in the comic, we see Swamp Thing and the boy interacting, and the boy will say something to the effect of, you're not really a monster, because if you were a monster, you wouldn't be trying to save me, or you wouldn't be trying to save the planet. In this book, it's constantly referenced that Swamp Thing is looking for a snow monster. The snow monster was named by the boy, and the snow monster is the reason why there's no life and we're looking at a snow planet. And what the impression that we get is that the life that Swamp Thing is leading here has become routine. He goes out, he protects the boy from whatever threats that are perceived. He keeps him warm at night, and it's rinse, wash, repeat. We don't know how long this has gone on. And we see as the story progresses that Swamp Thing gradually becomes weaker. Swamp Thing's connection with the green is severed, so he's not he's weak and he can't think straight, but he keeps going because I'm assuming that the way the visual cues are in the story, it just has become routine. He and this boy have a relationship, and the relationship drives him forward. In the story, the boy tells Swamp Thing, "Hey, I don't have a father. I didn't have a father, and so you can fulfill this role." And this goes back to Swamp Thing being a flawed god. He's a godlike character with godlike powers, but he has human frailties and human issues, thoughts and feelings. So when the boy tells him, "Hey, you can fill in my father role," this gives Swamp Thing the strength to keep going, the resolve to keep going, even though he's getting weaker by the page. Toward the end of the book, Swamp Thing is just in the snow and he's dying. And he finally realizes that the source of all the pain, the reason why the world is dying, is because the boy is the monster. And at this point, he kills the boy. Now, in most relationships that are toxic or have negative outcomes, we know the relationship is bad. We know something's not right, and we press on because we want things to be right. And in a lot of times, we do things in these relationships that we normally wouldn't do under any other circumstances. In this book, we see Swamp Thing kill a bear. We see him kill a guy. We see him actually go to sever the child's leg. And we see this happen in the book, and we see it on panel, but it doesn't appear that Swamp Thing that remembers doing that. And in the next page, we see the boy back with his leg, and that was a tell that something wasn't right, because Tom King actually glosses over it, but he doesn't. That was like the first hint that something wasn't right with the boy. Swamp Thing doesn't pick it up because Swamp Thing isn't thinking straight, because his connection with the world is off. He's totally engrossed in this relationship with this boy because he's fulfilled by what the boy brings to the table, being that he's fulfilled by being the protector of this boy under these circumstances and being a father to him. This is almost like the exact opposite of what happened in the PlayStation game The Last of Us, where Joel didn't want to be a father figure to Ellie, and he ends up going into that role and wanting to be protector. Swamp Thing jumps right into being the father and protector to the boy, and totally disregards everything, all of the signs around him that something is wrong with this situation. And one of the tales that comes across when Swamp Thing kills the boy is that there's no way that this child could have survived in this world under normal circumstances. So when he says that he's the monster, he says that the boy is the monster, he also admits to himself that he is the monster because he was so caught up in the relationship that he allowed himself to act outside of himself. He killed these monsters, he killed these animals, he killed these people. He allowed the world to basically die because he was fulfilled by what the child brought to him, and the happiness, even though he really may not have been happy, he was fulfilled. So while he was being fulfilled by the relationship and practically dead, he was selfish. He ignored the problem that was directly in front of him. And this is systemic of most toxic relationships. You lose parts of yourself until you have nothing left, and you are the source of your own misery, and you have no one else to blame but yourself and your culpability in your own destruction. This is Jamal from Planet EJOBN, The Extraordinary Journey of a Black Nerd, and until next time, bye bye.